Fanservice. The bane of writers, or is it? Most of us know what fanservice is, but to the few who don't, fanservice is a mainly Eastern thing done in storytelling intended to give back to the audience. The most often brought up examples of this are women who are undermined into basically being hot eye candy for male pleasure. But fanservice can come in many ways, whether it be gay or lesbian baiting, paid radio conversation with K-pop idols, or just a random hot person in a show. It's prevalent throughout almost all media. But there's an ongoing debate about whether or not it's a bad thing. Well, at first it just seems like it's a simple issue, black and white and just bad. This isn't always the case. Sometimes, fanservice can be used in ways that empower writing and further characterization. But today, I want to look specifically at Genshin's fanservice in a vacuum. While it obviously has fanservice, I want to genuinely ask whether or not it's a bad thing. Does Genshin manage to write fanservice well, or is it just as shallow as it appears? Let's get into it. Before we get into it, a quick reminder to like and sub. I make a ton of videos just like this examining Genshin's writing. If you want to stay up to date with when I post, make sure to turn your notifications, or join the Discord to be part of an amazing writing community. Before I talk about my thoughts, though, I want to explain the angle I'm approaching this from. In most of my videos, I have a clearly defined view on a writing technique. Like in my Kokomi vs. Heathen or Gatlin vs. Inazuma videos, I start with writing one bad and the other good. This video is my way of answering a question that I personally have. I can say with confidence that I am unbiased on this topic 90% of the time, if not 100%, believe me or not. But by the end, obviously, I'll have made up my mind, and you're free to agree or disagree. Alright, let's get into it. So, let's just establish some common ground here. 1. What makes good versus bad fanservice? In most accounts I've seen, bad fanservice is fanservice that actively detracts from the story. Are we shifting focus from an important plot point to focus on some boobs, for example? Is this character overly sexual for what this character is supposed to be? If it's yes to either, this is just bad fanservice. What I consider to be good fanservice is fanservice that doesn't harm or in some cases even helps the story. In second common ground, yes, Genshin has fanservice, though it's not as bad as other games. For example, I once played a gacha game with the main villain's outfit with just chains over her nipples and a thong. So literally just corn with a P. I personally can't stand games with a lot of fanservice since it usually comes across as forced. Not to mention whenever I see floating tits, I feel physically uncomfortable. A lot of people that I've talked to feel similar, saying it takes away from the engagement when a girl's shirt is ripped off by a light breeze. But I've seen people point to games like this and say, hey, Genshin doesn't have fanservice, there's nothing like that here, and they're just flat out wrong. No, Genshin doesn't have fanservice this bad. Honestly, as fanservice goes, Genshin is one of the tamest games I've played. But to say fanservice isn't present in this game is just wrong. For example, take a look at literally every female character. All of them, except for Arlecchino, Jean, and maybe one other I missed, all have their legs or at least upper thighs on full display. Tights count with this too. But is this a bad thing? Let's start by looking at either side. First bad, then good, and then I'll make up my mind at the end. To start, you'll notice all the most egregious cases of Genshin fanservice come from the early days. Genshin hadn't really developed its own identity yet, and that's clear. It, like a lot of gacha games, relied a lot on sex appeal for sale. Noelle, for example, is a warrior, a badass knight. In what world does she need boob armor? Moan is an astrologist. Why does she need a swimsuit? While the sexualization is still present to a degree, I'd argue most outfits nowadays at least make some sense for the character. Mulan shows a lot of skin, but it's meant to be a swimsuit. But I can't agree Shaloni's outfit is a bit fanservice-y. But fanservice is bad, it takes away from the character. Let's look at two of the most obvious examples of this, Raiden and Skirk. Whatever your thoughts on Raiden's character, I think we can agree some aspects of her design kinda suck. I can appreciate some aspects of her design, especially the sleeves and hair clip. The secret meaning behind them tied to Makoto is genuinely deep and good design. And I also appreciate some physical features. Look, there's a reason she's one of my mains, top 1% by the way. But appreciate them though, I do. I'll admit it's a bit weird and incredibly impractical. But hold me some dirt for a second here. I had some swords, so I tried replicating her Booba sword slash to see how it would work. To put it bluntly, it didn't. When I slipped in her own brush to see how she managed to pull it cleanly out, you can see that she literally slices through her boob. What? There are so many other places to put her sword. If you wanted to keep the fanservice, do it on her hip and flash her ass as she pulls it or something. Do something that makes anatomical sense, please. And I'll admit, that sounds a little nitpicky, so I won't talk about the writing now. The main fanservice problem I have with Raiden isn't her design, but her writing. In the Inazuma arc on Quest, Raiden stands out as well written. She's masterfully established as a threat. While sometimes the context around her suffers, she in a vacuum is definitely a threat to be feared. And this is true until her first story quest. And that we go and take Raiden's and we wanted to kill us barely a few days ago on a date. In order to sell her, they turned her into a soft, confused girl who doesn't know what a photo is. I'm not saying she had to stay a stone-cold villain forever. Hell, I wouldn't be mad if this was her character. But the way this transformation is achieved is just so weird to me. It comes across as one of those weird I can fix him/her fantasies. Having this ship come from her on a date with us just takes me out of it. But even if you disagree with that, there's one character I think most, if not all of us can agree has an out-of-place design. Skirk. Skirk is a barely teased character who we meet at the end of Fontaine, but my lord, her design. Where parts of writings at least made sense for her, Skirk has none of those understandable touches. Let me start by describing her character. Skirk is an elusive combat master. She trained a child and shaped him into the harbinger who he is today. She spends her time deep in the abyss, literally living in one of, if not the most hostile environment in Teyvat. When I imagine Skirk, I imagine an older, rugged woman, scarred, muscular, hardened by her life. Even if they didn't want scars or wrinkles on her, I at least imagine an older woman with some bandages and armor. But she'd have parts of her that were soft, like the one that took in the teenage child and taught him all he knew. Plenty of hoarding eyes want a badass fighter woman, so just look at Thea Simps. Something similar to that could have been perfect. But what design did we get? This. She looks straight out of HSR. While I think her design is cool, similar to Raiden's, it just doesn't fit her character. A short dress with weird trails and extra cloth just does not fit who she may have to be. She looks like she's wearing newspapers after you put it through the shredder. And why make her this way? Because it's hot, I guess? She's showing skin in places that make no sense for a warrior like her. In fact, she shows skin where most sensible warriors would put their armor. It looks cool in a vacuum, sure, and I love the way her legs are done, but in the context of her character, it just makes no sense. Plus, I just want to touch on most of the warrior women in general. To be honest, I don't really care whether they show skin or not. Most of them are adult women and can dress however they want. I'm not here to be the cleavage police. If you want to feel sexy and wear something that makes you feel confident in your body, go for it. But with that being said, there is no logical reason for a lawyer or blacksmith to be in a bikini and shorts. For some characters it works, like Dia and Candace live in the desert, so of course not in full body suits. But to summarize my reason for this being bad fan service, it's detracting from their character. It just doesn't make sense for a seasoned warrior's character to have no chest support. Like I said before, it's a fantasy game, so it doesn't all have to make sense. But when a character's design actively detracts from the character, that's when I have the problem. They say don't judge a book by its cover, but we naturally do. A design is a window into that character, a way for us to judge who they are. We should at least be able to guess a rough personality from the design of that character. If someone with no context looked at Skirk or Raiden, I'm willing to bet their first guess would not be warrior. Before moving on to the arguments that fanservice is fine, I want to touch on the men. Specifically, two of them. Alhaitham and Kaveh. Ship it or not, they get fanservice all the time. No matter what way you swing it, they're definitely implied by the story to be more than friends. And yaoi baiting is pretty common as fanservice goes. We're constantly given, quote, domestic Kavatham in little bits and pieces that the fans eat up every time. And yes, this is harmful to the writing. While having these little bits isn't inherently bad, like everything else I've mentioned, it's the context surrounding it. Due to Kavatham's ship, Kaveh's characterization is off the charts. It's a constant feeling that he's just Alhaitham's boyfriend, when he's much more. Honestly, this would be any better if we met Kaveh separate from Alhaitham first. But because our first interactions with him are after the Archon quest and Alhaitham's story quest, his own story is tied to Alhaitham's. If we had a run-in with him in Act 1 or 2 of Sumeru, then everything else could probably work fine on its own. But because of all the yaoi baiting in Genshin's writing, his story is simplified to just another, much more highlighted character's boyfriend. Okay, so now we finished the bad stuff. Damn, that took long. But now we need to look at the other side of the argument. In Genshin's story, are there any cases fanservice works? And I think fanservice in general can be done very well, with a lot of nuance and depth. Some very good shows I've seen in the past have fanservice to make a statement about society objectifying female bodies, or very beautiful women are shown using this fanservice to manipulate not just in-world characters, but actual viewers. Best example of this I know is Makima from Chainsaw Man. But does Genshin have those good fanservice that they use to characterize and add nuance? Let's start with some examples. The first good example, and hear me out for a second, Lisa. I think we can all agree without a doubt that she's a fanservice character. But what makes her good is that's just part of who she is. Throughout her interactions with the characters, whether it be the Traveler, or Jean, Diluc, Kaya, and basically everyone, she flirts with them to some degree. Lisa's not a flirt because of fanservice. She's just a flirt because that's who she is. And more importantly, it doesn't distract her from the story. As for working with her in Mondstadt's story, she's more serious. She's not stoic since that's just not who she is, but her priority is getting stuff done. When she needs to get down to business, we see that she is capable of doing that, and that's what makes her fanservice good. I'm not saying she's the most nuanced, best-written character ever, since that's just not true, but I think in terms of fanservice, it works. Another decent example, I think, would be Yelan. Again, she's got fanservice elements, but they're also a big part of her character. The focus for Yelan is literally how attractive she is. There's multiple cases of NPCs underestimating her for being a pretty woman who sexualizes herself. Because said NPCs let their guard down, she's a much easier time dealing with them. Her beauty is just a part of who she is, and she weaponizes it. While her outfit has some of the problems that Raiden's does, she's a clear reason for it being that way. But if this was her only trait, that would be a recipe for shallowness. Good thing she's got more than that. Yolanda also has a life beyond fanservice. Similar to Lisa, she's not all flirting. Especially in the Archon quest, she has a conflict completely unrelated to her character, where she drops the charismatic flirt attitude and shows genuine fear for Zhao losing his life like her old teammates. But then I ran into a bit of a brick wall. As I looked through Genshin's roster, I wasn't able to find as many characters with justifiable fanservice as I hoped. There were a few others like Navia, Dia, etc., but I'd just be repeating what I already said. So, what's my verdict? Is fanservice a problem or not? And I'm genuinely disappointed to say that it kind of is. Like I keep saying, inherent fanservice isn't a bad thing. And we're playing a gacha game. If you're going into this expecting no fanservice, that's just naive. But the problem is the way the fanservice is presented. Most of the fanservice in Genshin does not serve a greater purpose for the story. Or not even that, makes sense for the character. Not every design has to be a masterclass of fabric narratives, but I've yet to see any Genshin warrior with actual armor, besides Ayaka, but we all know her fanservice. But as it stands, even some of Genshin's best characters and best designs have unexplained fanservice to them that just feels shoehorned in. Even Chaska, who just came out, is literally missing a pant leg for the sake of fanservice. There's ways this can be done well. If Genshin can find ways for the character story to explain the fanservice, I have no problems with it. I've seen fanservice done well, and I have every confidence Genshin can pull it off. So, yeah, that's about it. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and sub to support me. Even one new person means so much. Are there any characters I missed that you think fanservice did well or poorly? With the stuff I presented to you, what are your opinions on Genshin's fanservice, and what's your take? Let me know in the comments. And check my community tab for a poll on the next video. With that, have a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night wherever you are, and I hope to see you in the next one.